Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining. Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of the Kyle and Kerry Show, also known as the Heat of Command podcast.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Thank you. Maybe we could rename it. Anyways, thanks for sticking with us. And if you tuned in, the last two episodes was a two-part episode because we got really long-winded, but I was in love with those episodes. Those are my love languages, talking about values and how they pertain to leadership. And I love that we talked about department values. And we've been getting feedback from you guys, some emails and some comments, and that makes us super excited. So thank you guys that have reached out and commented, and everybody that's liked or followed or shared us. We greatly appreciate all of that. So for this episode, we thought we'd do something a little bit different. And I got the idea on Monday. I was down at the Hampton Fire Training Center, and regionally, we do a ton of stuff as a region here in the Hampton Roads area, which is really cool. So for years and years, they've done a Hampton Roads Command School. So it's for aspiring officers, and for a year, they go down to Hampton, and then sometimes York County hosts it as well. And it's a 2-day flip-flop. So you either go on Friday or Saturday, and day 2 is Sunday or Monday. And it's all kinds of different topics, strategies and tactics, a bunch of different leadership classes. And they are a good way through their program this year. And they did a leadership panel. And on day 1, I think they had maybe company officer level, or I'm not exactly sure what day 1 panel exactly consisted of, but day 2 panel was some battalion chiefs and let's see, actually, and I think there was a lieutenant, maybe a couple of lieutenants, but anyways, they could ask any kind of leadership questions they wanted. It was just a panel discussion, super laid back, almost kind of rapid fire questions that they had prepared as a class. And then they asked some individually. And I thought, what better way just to pick the brains of different leaders? And I wish maybe every episode that we interview somebody, we pick a couple questions and ask them all the same questions. Like, what's one thing you wish you knew before you got promoted? And what's one thing you've learned since, or something like that? And we ask everybody, and I'm sure there'd be 1,000 different answers. So I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
But I thought for this episode, we could do like speed dating leadership style. So I had a bunch of guys and girls at work today text me tonight with some random leadership questions, just anything they wanted to ask that they wanted to hear answers to. And so they have been coming in, and I have tried my best to not think about them, so that these are kind of off the cuff, candid answers from Kyle and I. And we'll see how it goes. Some of them we may have to like take a pass on. I don't know, but let's see what we come up with. Are you excited? Are you nervous?
A little bit of both, we'll see what kind of questions we got. I'm excited. I'm nervous. Where's it going to go?
Yeah.
But that's the fun part of these conversations and talking about leadership. And by no means do Kerry and I think that we are the experts and we know it all and all this stuff, but it's just bringing our experiences forward. And I think that's beneficial to a lot of people, just because I think a lot of times we have a lot of similar experiences in a lot of ways, but different in other ways. So it's just being able to have these open conversations. I think it's awesome.
Let's just get rolling. And some of these we may get long-winded. I should set like a time limit, like a buzzer that goes off. We have to answer quickly. So, all right, I'm just going to pick one. So here's one that came in, and it says, what was your hardest task, or I guess thing, to overcome to get to where you are today? And looking back with what you know now, would you change, or how would you change getting past it? You're laughing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to start, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I can think of something right away for me. If I'm just going to try to answer like first thing that pops in my head. So for me, the hardest thing to overcome was confidence. And I think that's just something for me. I I had to get a lot more confident to be more successful because I think I had it in me. I just didn't have the confidence to let that kind of shine through, I guess. So for me, in almost every role that I've been in, it's been a lack of confidence. And I overcame that, but by just practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing, whatever it is I didn't have confidence in. So like when I first got promoted to captain, I would go through in my head like a Rolodex of if I went on this call, what would I do? And I would just make sure, like if it was something I wasn't 100% sure on, I would ask people, I would look it up, I would practice it. I would practice what I would say on the radio. And I just did it over and over with all different scenarios. Like if this happened, or if I thought about something in the firehouse that I wasn't sure how to handle. So like, oh, if I had an employee that got arrested off duty, do I know what I'm supposed to do? And I'd look in the personnel policies and procedures manual. Or if I have an employee that like drinking on the job, like what's the disciplinary level for that or whatever. And I just constantly just created a Rolodex in my brain so that I would work on my confidence. And then after enough time and doing it for a while, it kind of, just kind of evolves. But I think that was the hardest thing to overcome for me.
Can I get a repeat of the question real quick?
Yeah. So what was your hardest task to overcome to get to where you are today?
Man, there's just so much there. I look back and, I think a lot of it I've talked about. I think the hardest task is really finding out who I truly am. And, I'm in the midst of that journey now. And I think we all are in our lives. Some know it, some don't know it. As I graduated high school and went off to the military, you go to the military and you try to fit in this box of what the military expects, right? And then you come into the fire service and the same thing. I'm trying to meet what the fire service is. And it should be kind of the other way around, especially when we talk about authenticity, right? So you're trying to become something that you're not. You're trying to fit into characteristics and personalities that are associated with the military, the fire service. So, I spent a lot of time like really driving, and this is my identity. This is who I am. And in reality, a lot of those traits that are in that firefighter box are not who I am at my core. That doesn't make me less of a firefighter or anything like that, but it's really learning, as we talked about the last few episodes, my truest values, what's really important to me. And, a lot of those things don't fit in the firefighter box, but they sure as heck play a role in being an effective firefighter and a leader within organizations and so much more, and a lot of times we just don't think that way. We think we have to fit inside this box. And if we don't, we're outsiders. Now, a lot of times I get treated like an outsider, but that's okay because I'm more of my authentic self. So I think it's just that journey. And I'll be completely honest, as I continue to go through that journey, it's like sometimes I'm like a junior in high school, still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Because sometimes as you learn and grow, you look back at your life and man, if knowing what I know now, I probably would have never gone into this profession, but I wouldn't know what I know now if it wasn't for the road that I've already traveled. So it's like, I'm grateful for it, and so it's like, what's next? What's that forward thinking and what really is it where my values truly align with what I do with my life? So it's kind of that journey and really learning who I am at my core and not being identified by anything in my outside surroundings.
Great answer.
I practice. No, not really.
Okay, so next question. We're just going to roll on. This is a hard one. Oh, this is really hard.
Why? Right. Can we start off with a couple easy ones? I'm sweating over here now.
No, we're not taking the easy road. Okay. All right, so I'll ask it for you and for me. So if you were able to make one operational change to your fire department, so to Oak Brook Fire Department, to better serve the citizens, what would it be? And that question was to me to operational change for James City County to better serve the citizens.
Yeah, and I think within my organization, I think it's staffing. I mean, plain and simple for us, it's staffing and the way we operate. And from historically how we operate to where we operate today is a lot different. We're running more calls with less people. It's just a fact. And you start looking at the dangers associated with that, not only on the firefighters, but responding out into our community. We're running a lot more calls, utilizing mutual aid a lot more. We're going mutual aid a lot more. It's the story kind of the Illinois Fire Service as a whole. It's like how much doing more with less. And it's like ever since I got into the industry, that's the story. Doing more with less, doing more with less, doing more with less. We're not getting any slower. We're getting substantially busier, and we're doing it with less people. So it's dangerous all around. It's dangerous for us at work. It's dangerous, for the citizens in which we serve. But, so far, knock on wood, that things are going all right. So, it always takes that one thing to happen, and we don't want that to happen. But that's, that's kind of how it goes. So yeah, definitely staffing.
Cool. Oh, this is a hard one. This is going to sound off the wall, and this, I may take some heat for this, but, I've always, not always, looking at the military model and how specialized the job fields are in the military. So like you could be in charge of body part recovery from an aircraft crash, and that's your whole career. Like you are the subject matter expert. So I believe at some point separating fire and EMS again and really having specialty career paths where we don't rotate around, because you can't become a subject matter expert in car seat installation and fire behavior and advanced cardiac life support and delivering a baby and neonatal resuscitation and placenta previa, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And we're doing a phenomenal job of training our folks to do a lot of very technical stuff, and I think we're doing a very good job. But what's the tipping point? And we rotate people through positions, and just about the time you become really, really proficient in your area, we move, which is good because it's good for development and motivation, and you don't get burnout or bored and stuff. So there's pros and cons to everything. But at some point, citizens call the fire department for things they can't figure out, which could be anything. And so we just really have to be these subject matter experts in, vehicle extrication and stabilization and divers and boat operators and wildlife. It just, on and on and on. So
yeah, that's just to comment on that. That is, I really like that. I think that is a very forward thinking, progressive way to think within our industry. And, again, not only are we running more calls, but what is being asked of us within the last 20 years has substantially grown. So we're doing it with less people. We have more responsibility. So that means, you use the term subject matter expert. Can we really become that in our current environment? And when you're the jack of all trades, you're the master of none, right? So at what, as you said, what point is the tipping point where you start dividing some of these tasks? And I it's just different not being in the big city. Obviously, big cities, they have that ability. But out in suburban areas, we just don't have that ability due to staffing, and the expectations grow, the call volume grows, and the staffing decreases, and it makes one scratch a head sometimes. But I really like the way you put that, and I think that is maybe one day.
Yeah. I mean, that's a long ways away, and that's a whole, that's not a, you become the fire chief and day 2, you say, this is what we're doing.
Right.
It's, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
All right. That was a good one.
That was a good one.
All right. Let's see what we got. All right. Do you believe diversity of any type is promoted in the fire service? If not, how did you push through it? So I think I understand the question, but I'm going to try to answer it the best I can. So it makes me think of 2 things. So do I believe diversity is, I'm guessing they're asking are they asking do we promote diversity? Like we want to make sure we are a diverse organization, or promoted, you get permit, diversity is promoted. I'm going to answer it a couple ways. So I sit on the interview panel, and I have for a long time. And we used to always ask every applicant, we would ask, do you their opinion on diversity in the fire service and why it's important. And when we first started asking the question, man, we would get all kinds of inappropriate answers. And then some people didn't know what it meant. And that was kind of when diversity and inclusion really became important, rightfully so, in the fire service. And then I would say within the last like 3 years, we asked the question, and all of the new folks look at us like we're crazy. Like, of course it's important. Like, how old are you that you would need to ask us that? Like, and they can't even think of a time. So we would ask like about diversity and a time they had to work with someone that was different than them culturally or whatever, and what were the challenges and how did they like navigate that? And they'd be like, I can't even think of an example of what you're talking about. Like, so we stopped kind of answering it because I think as a society we have come so far. Now there is a way to go. Now if they're asking about promotion here where I work, I never thought of it as like as a from a woman, like there was anything really, any thought behind. It was always just who the best candidate was. It wasn't your skin color, or where you come from or your, gender or anything like that. So um I was the first female battalion chief, but I didn't ever think of it like that. Like I didn't, it just was.
Yeah, I don't, like I'm more in line with those younger people that are get asked the question on diversity. I remember I was applying for a job at a college up here, and there was a question on diversity, and I was like, I'm not applying for this job if you're asking me this question. This is ridiculous. Like my whole life, where I grew up, it was a very diverse area. I was in the military. I didn't care about anything as long as you have my back, right? Like, why are you asking me this? Like, it's just crazy. And I get it, right? I get it. But I didn't end up applying for that job because I was just so taken back by that question. And it's like, it's unreal. Like, how about you meet me? Let's have a conversation. And then we just go from there and you learn about my background. We don't even need to go into this stuff. And I think, in Illinois, so much is dictated by state law. So it kind of, requires diversity and it's, this is an industry based on a lot of traditions. And I understand that there's still some ways that some people think and the way they, organizations are and afraid to be forward thinking and progressive. Like I get that that's probably still out there. And I think a lot of it, like I was talking about in that last question, like what are the characteristics of a firefighter when you think firefighter, like what's in that box, and if you don't fit in that box, what's that life going to look like for you entering in this service? And I understand that there's challenges and there may be challenges for other races and genders and stuff that don't fit into that box. In 2024, I think we've advanced a little bit, but I don't think we're all the way there, right? Yeah. And I still think there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done. And some of these, an unpopular opinion, but some of the older souls out there that are preventing this stuff from moving forward, it's probably time to retire.
Yeah, some of my favorite people that I've worked with, regardless of their skin color or ethnicity, didn't fit that checkbox of
right.
What the the typical firefighter, right? That we hiring in the past, and they were my favorite because they just thought so differently on calls and in the station, and it was just a breath of fresh air sometimes. So that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, I think from that you see more authenticity when you don't fit into the box because you're being true to yourself, right? And you understand who you are and you're bringing that into the industry, which is what we want individuals to do, what we talk about here, right? Whatever your values are, whatever's in your box, not the firefighter box, your box, bring into our industry because that's what we want. That's what creates diversity, not trying to develop this list and you must be this, this, and this if you want to be a firefighter, right? And that does not create any diversity whatsoever. And again, I think there's some progress. I think there's still some work to be done.
Yeah. And you can tell so much in an interview. If you run an interview in a way that you can ask hard questions and be comfortable waiting for a real honest response. And I think in James City, we end up hiring just such amazing people. All the people we've hired lately have just been just great human beings. How about what is the best advice you have for a fresh out of the academy firefighter that has aspirations of being a part of the department leadership team one day?
I think it comes to first and foremost is learning the job. It's very cool to see the eagerness and the anticipation of someone. He's so young and energetic coming into the industry, and that they come. A lot of times, the first questions that I'll ask somebody, like, "What are your career goals?" Like, I want to know if you want to be an officer, you want to be a chief. All right, that gives us tools, the ability to develop a professional development program that's going to help them achieve that. But with that said, I think there's a lot of work that needs to go on in order to achieve that. And you need to make that known. It's also being able to have those hard conversations, that, hey, you're not going down the right path, or, you need to do work better here. And it's an opportunity to establish a very good professional relationship from the get-go, because that's what's going to enable somebody to walk that road and attain those ranks in a timely fashion, or reach their goals as they want to. But it's setting strong expectations from the get-go on what that's going to entail, telling them you'll be their biggest supporter, that you're there to help them. But it's we got to walk, or we got to crawl first. We got to walk, and then we can run, right? So it's baby steps at first. Learn the job, and take that serious. Learn everything that we got to do, and then once you start building that competence and that confidence in those abilities, now it's time to start looking bigger picture, right? Do we have composure on the scenes, and then start throwing decision-making abilities in there as well. So I think we could talk about this for a long time on what that looks like, but I think on the surface, it's open conversations and from the get-go, and setting the expectations, and, as long as they're putting in the work, well, I'll be right. We'll be right there behind you, pushing you along the way. But it's not just gonna be handed to you. See, but that's where, like, not gonna try and get on a soapbox here, but like a lot of times, like now in our area, like we're seeing promotional processes, and like nobody's going for promotion, or nobody's going for the job. So like sometimes it could just be timing, and boom, you get promoted and stuff. So it's just an interesting time we find ourselves in, up here at least.
Yeah, and I would say similar answer. Learn each part of your job well, build your confidence, and I would say find people in the profession that you have watched or about their career progression, and pick their brain, like how, or kind of not emulate, because you want your own style, but like how did successful people before you do what they did? And I would say too, look at people that are good leaders, but that stumbled some and made some mistakes, and learn from those, so that you maybe don't make the same thing, but we can learn from, what they've done. Like, okay, they did this, it didn't work out so good for them, so I'm going to do my best to make sure I go a different route.
Yeah, I think I got a good follow-up question to this, Kerry, and
Okay.
I think this kind of this came in from one of our listeners out in Massachusetts. So that's kind of cool. And to talk about going for a promotion and a young person coming in, how do you break it to someone who is very capable of doing their job, but by all accounts of others, this person should not progress any further?
Ooh, that's some hard conversations, right?
Yep.
And and I think you would do someone a disservice if you weren't honest about that to them, and say, because gosh, that's hard. That's a whole episode.
Yeah, I
This
totally.
topic's a whole episode about promotion and stuff like that. But that's, yeah, it's but it's compassionate conversations. It's, because if someone wasn't, if you really felt, and that was someone that probably shouldn't run a crew or whatever it is, or progress past, maybe it's somebody going to the chief level, but they got it anyways, and no one ever talked to them, what a hard road they'd have,
Yeah.
and how happy would they be in their position if they weren't successful in it? Because that would be terrible to come to work every day and not be good at your job, right?
Yeah, if they knew they weren't good, or they thought they were good, right?
Yeah, there's gotta at least be a sensation of it, like a feeling of it, like, "This isn't working."
Yeah.
So, conversations before that happens, so that someone's not set up for failure.
Yeah, and I think, it starts with that young person coming in saying, hey, I want to be an officer, at the day one, like that's their career goals. Cool. And I think that's the important part of you taking this journey and everything me and you talk about on learning who you are so you're your authentic self, because that allows people, they're going to see that and they're going to just be attracted to you. And then when you want to have those serious conversations, their defenses hopefully won't be up. Because a lot of times you go and have these conversations, somebody's defenses are going to go up right away. I've been in many conversations and right away they want to throw it back at you. And it's like, hold on here. I'm trying to build everybody. Like I'm no better than anybody. I make mistakes all the time. Cool. But it's you being your authentic self, I think, is where it starts, right? And having these conversations from the get-go from their careers. And then having things in place like a professional development plan, and then performance reviews every year. And then if they're not meeting expectations, we are doing improvement plans. Mm-hmm. And if they're still not meeting expectations, then, we want to change behavior. And if it's not changing, we have to go the disciplinary route. Me and you talk about all the time. We're not saying that this is a safe space or we're getting soft. I think we're getting harder. But as long as things are in place, because we could get harder if things are in place. We can't get harder if we're just treating everybody different and we have double standards and triple standards. But if you have these things in place from the get-go, and you have these types of plans in place where these conversations are regularly happening, then hopefully we can steer them in a different direction. And like you brought up and with the previous questions, that people start going into specialties. Like, what if they are better at EMS? Cool, like go that way. But like right now, there's no career path for just EMS by us, or just technical rescue, or just hazmat, or just, technology in the fire service. There's no career path. There's just one. Like I start looking at the industry and it's just crazy. There's only one career path and that's it. So what if we could establish other career paths where we can put people in positions where they're really going to succeed and flourish, rather than, in Illinois, it's all state law. So if they promote up, whether they're good or not. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I think this is a huge question that we can look at, but it's having proper things in place to where we can have these conversations, open conversations, hard conversations. And at the end of the day, you could tell someone you shouldn't do this, and they get promoted anyways. Well, then it's still having those reviews annually, your improvement action plans, and if they're not meeting the standard, they get demoted or they get let go. And that's unfortunately the way it is. And if we have all that stuff documented through the years, like we did our due diligence, we did our job, we tried, we wanted to see you succeed, but it didn't work out. So that's where it starts, right? The documentation and having these processes in place to allow these types of conversation and growth to happen. And I think in a lot of places that just does not happen.
Yeah, I think we should write this down and do a whole promotion, I don't know. I'm just thinking of things for future episodes because we could talk about this for so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. It's not, we're not being softer or actually holding different. And you said something about, performance evaluations. And I think, and I don't know if it's still true today, but I think there are some leaders out there that's the only time they give, they wait until the eval and the door is closed to tell somebody they're not doing a good job or they're not meeting expectations, where that should not be a surprise.
Right.
That's a continuous conversation about good, things you're doing well and things you're not doing so great, and what you're doing to work on them. But I've seen that happen. Oh, by the way,
right.
I don't like that you do this, and you're not doing a very good job at this. Well, why didn't you tell me?
Right. Why didn't you help me fix this weakness I have? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? And it's no. A lot of times, here we go. So I'm getting on it, Kerry. A lot of times in this industry, we I don't even want to say lead. They manage by using fear and shame. Right? That's what our industry does. And that's what, you watch old military movies and boot camp, what it was like. And then we think that's how we have to be. And we got to get these people to do what we want them to do. And we're going to use fear and we're going to shame them. And that's still in our industry today. That is rampant in our industry. And it just boggles my mind that nobody wants to advance out of that. It's just crazy. And we think we're going to progress people using fear and shame. And we think we're going to get what we want out of them using fear and shame. And that's what people in leadership roles utilize today. And, I've experienced it. Many out there have experienced it, and they're still experiencing it today. And it just boggles my mind. Yet we can have things in place to where we can have real conversations, hard conversations, and people in leadership roles. Your goals should be your people, that they achieve greater heights than you ever did, right? That they are not making the mistakes you did. You should teach them the mistakes you made so they don't make the same ones, so they can make new ones, right? It's like, where'd the progress go? We understand you got promoted. We understand what position you are. Cool. Good for you. Now teach me. Mentor the people coming up instead of just shaming and fearing them. All right. Yeah. I could keep going.
Those people are not listening to our podcast.
Exactly. And I know there's going to be some people that are listening that they're like, yeah, right? And it's just like, come on, and it's so simple. It's so simple. And I could talk about this all day.
All right, I've got a bunch of good ones here that are on an email. So I like this one. How long did it take you to feel comfortable and proficient in the various leadership positions you have held? So for me, in where I work, we've kind of shifted away from lieutenant. So your first kind of promotion is to captain. That's the company officer level in our organization. And when I got promoted to captain, my battalion chief, Chris Thomas, told me to give it 3 years. He said 3 years and you'll feel pretty good in this position, and you'll feel comfortable and you'll be having fun. And he was right. It was 3 years for me to where I was like, this is the best job in the fire service. I loved riding that front seat and just the setting the goals of the day and helping people meet what they wanted to do. And I was having a great time, but it was 3 years for captain for me.
Yeah, I don't know if I could really put a time on it. I do know that my time in the military really benefited me a lot in the area of leadership and the stuff that I did and the leaders that I had the fortunate opportunity of learning from, and really what they enabled and the lessons they taught me on what leadership is, right? Leadership really isn't a rank. It's something that you earn, and people are going to follow you, and this is how you got to be, and this is what you got to do. So, at an early age, learning these things from some top-notch leaders that have been, in the military for 20, 30 plus years, just invaluable experiences and education. So bringing that with me into the fire service, I think one of the biggest things for me was just the having a good ability to just maintain composure in high stress situations and make decisions. And that was like the thing that I was like, I got to make sure that I'm building my competence here and my confidence here. And those first 6 months, it's like you're trying to figure out your footing, like where you stand. Are people happy you're promoted or mad you're promoted, and you get a whole mix of things. So you're like, how do I treat everybody? Like what, you're just kind of feeling it for lack of better words, like what's going on. And then once you get that feel for it, you just, again, it comes back to you do this work that Kerry and I talk about. You learn about your authentic self and you get promoted, and you shouldn't change, right? I think the biggest thing when people change, when they get promoted, they're not leaders, right? They're trying to be something that they're not. They're trying to be something they think they should be. They're trying to be something they saw in a movie or read in a book, and they're not being themselves. So I think as you promote, just stay who you are, on what you learn, what your values are, and bring that into the position. And then being able to make those decisions is the big thing.
And for me, I had a really interesting thing happen right when I first got promoted to captain. So I think I'd like to change my answer because
no.
Yes. This is a 50-50 partnership. So when I first got promoted, I was pretty comfortable with group dynamics already. Like I had done a little bit of work in that, and I just felt really good and really excited to like the people side of things. So right after I got promoted, one of the women that was working for me was painting our kitchen table. So she was painting a mural on our kitchen table, and it had an American flag and it had a firefighter kneeling in gear. And she painted 343 stars on that flag instead of the correct number. It was an artistic representation of, 9/11. And well, we got some complaints about the inaccuracy of the flag. And so I think I had been promoted all of a month. And I got a call from my battalion chief, and he said, Carrie, the deputy chief and the fire chief are on their way to see you. I was like, huh, well, I mean, I didn't get a chance to really get comfortable in this position. I mean, I can go back to the firefighter. So, anyways, I had to really stand up for her that, she had done this as a symbol of pride, and it was something, it was art. It wasn't, you know, it, I really had to stand up for what that meant and what she had put into it, because it was an employee that I think had some difficulties in our organization, and it was one of these. It was kind of like a make or break thing, probably for her. And I I remember telling the fire chief at the time, like, this is what it stands for, and this was the importance of, because he was trying to say at some point, he was like, well, she uh you know, what's the word? But she, like, basically defaced county property and like all. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, if we go down that whole route, what is this going to do to her? How she feels about this organization, and that was not her intent. This was something she did for the department and out of her love for the department and her love for art. And so we kind of went round and round. But after that, I was kind of like, okay, if I can have these conversations with the fire chief, like, it just felt really good. And after that, I felt pretty confident that, and I think it helped to my crew to see, hey, if it's the right thing, she's gonna stand up for us. And so I would say pretty early on in my time as a captain, the people part of it, I felt pretty good in. It took a little bit operationally, maybe, and I don't know if it was 3 full years, but two good years of riding that seat. But, sorry, I had to go back.
That's all right. I'll accept your second answer.
All right, let's see what else we got. What attributes do you look for when selecting future leaders for your organization? Or Kyle, if you're not part of the selection, like, what attributes do you think future leaders of your organization should have?
It's just what we talk about all the time. Yeah. Compassion and empathy. I really think that's where people need to start, and you need to have that compassion and empathy, that compassion for yourself. And, we've talked about how many people come into our industry and they're broken and they're damaged and they're trying to fit again in this firefighter box and have no sense of identity and who they really are. So it's really looking for that person that maybe is authentic as a young person. Maybe we'll start seeing more of that as, newer people and newer generations start coming into our industry and maybe aren't as damaged as people in my generation or things like that. So, I don't know. I think that's the biggest things that I would look for is not the normal, cliche terms that we hear about in the fire service. Obviously, I want a hard worker. I want, all these traits and that everybody out there wants that we can say. But I think what's really missing is that compassion and empathy to really understand how to lead people and understand people, right? Leadership is about people. It's not about processes and all this. It's about people. How do we work with people? And so it's really having those kind of abilities is what I would look for.
For me, I really look for self-awareness. So the ability to self-reflect. So we all make mistakes. And I think really good leaders know when they make them. And before you can even address it with them, they're already working on a correction. And so when I interview people for promotion, and there's a lot of questions about, like, when you work with somebody that's been a challenge. And I love, like, when people take some ownership in that it's not just the other person. It's, what am I doing to contribute and what am I doing to fix it? And questions about, making big mistakes and making sure you don't do them again. But I love somebody that's just really self-aware. Oh, here's a good one. So this person says one of the things that, as an older leader, that they try not to fall into is burnout. But how do you deal with burnout as a leader?
Yeah, I think it's having, your priorities away from the job, hobbies, not identifying yourself with the job, I think is a good start. And if you're already there, cool. And then it's what else is out there to kind of relieve that that mind and that body of some of the stresses that go along with the job. Further, I think it's really important that you have a community of people around you, and not necessarily people within the fire service, not necessarily people at your firehouse, but a community of people, good close friends that you can talk to and have open discussions with. I think as society has progressed, we have lost this sense of community, and I think you even see it in the firehouse that you just lost a lot of closeness within just your own organization on what it used to be like 40 years ago. It's not that way anymore. Everybody's got their own things and their own agendas and this and that. But I think that you need that community. You need each other, and it doesn't have to be, again, at the firehouse. You just need a group of people. Because if you have a group of people in your corner supporting you, fighting for you, praying for you, being there, and you could be that person for them too, that holds a lot of weight in preventing burnout. So it's not going home and sitting with your own thoughts, but you have, again, it's that support system and a community of people, I think, is where really a goal. And I think that alone can solve a lot of issues too. So,
Yeah, for me, when I feel burnout, it's usually, I'm not taking care of myself health wise. So I have to regularly work out and get good sleep, or I'm kind of a disaster. And I can tell at work, I'm like, what's wrong with me? Oh, yeah. I've been eating well, I've been sleeping well, and I haven't been working out. So that's one thing I do. And another thing is, for me, I have to be engaged in something. So I can tell at work if I'm getting like irritated, or like it's because I'm working on monotonous stuff, which, that's part of the job too. But I need to be, I want to feel engaged and involved, and like almost like I'm doing something meaningful. So if I'm not, I have to remind myself, all right, find the next thing that you want to tackle, and it needs to be meaningful. That helps me.
yeah, I think it's very easy to get caught in getting burned out. Not even as a leader, not even as an officer, just with this job. So it's, again, having your strategies is very important to prevent that.
This is our Leaders Born or Made, and we've talked about this one already. So I'll just refer them back to whatever episode that was where you put me in my place about.
Yeah, I don't even remember what episode. I mean, we can hit on it real quick. I used to think that leaders were born, that you were born a leader. And then, I've been with my wife for 21 years. We're going on 21 years. That's crazy. And I would like she's not a leader. She's nowhere close to being a leader. Now, when you find out what you're truly passionate about, your values, you can definitely lead in that arena, right? My wife is a photographer. She goes out and does these sessions, and she does great work there. I can never do that, but she's leading those people, right? People are literally following every word that she's saying, and they're doing it. So in that essence, she is a leader, right? She is influencing people to do something, and they're doing it. Could she come to a fireground and run a scene? Absolutely not, right? But I could go there, but I can't do photography. So I think we all have an ability to lead. It's just in what area. I think a lot of times when we think this term leadership, we think military, fire, police, EMS, all this stuff. But leadership applies to to teachers, right? And so many different avenues where we look at where leadership is happening and what that term really means. So I used to think people could be born a leader. I think, if you find out what your truest passions and values are, you can lead in that area for sure.
What is your most memorable leadership failure?
I think I've talked about this before. Well, it's a few for me, and
Jerk Kyle?
What was that?
Being jerk Kyle? When you were
Yeah,
jerk?
yeah. And I've talked about it numerous times on this, and when we go out and speak, and I'll have to bring Zach on one time. I think that would actually probably be a pretty cool interview. And he's the one who kind of caught the brunt of who I was, and kind of how I was a jerk, and how I approached because I was a mentor before I was an officer, and I would mentor new people coming in, and my approach was just not stellar, right? It was just hardcore, and you had to fit into this firefighter box. And if you didn't, what did I do? I used shame and fear, right? Which is just so wrong. And, through a lot of growth and overcoming that, obviously I know I look back and I did a lot of things wrong. And at least Zach could call me a friend now. And I think we're hanging out on Sunday coming up. So this post Monday, so we hung out yesterday. So it's pretty cool. It's cool how it came full circle, and it's like, that's my biggest message. Like, it's okay to make mistakes, and we got to learn from them and where you went wrong. And some things lined up in my life where I got that harsh lesson, and I'm very grateful for that lesson, and I'm glad I didn't continue down the path I was on. So, that was a pretty big failure, and it's, and again, still some challenges facing with changing and my outlooks now, but we deal with those as they come, and that's what you do. So what's yours?
A couple things come to mind. The first failure I had as a leader, and it's something I'll never forget. And it wasn't a huge deal. It really wasn't. And it corrected itself very quickly, but it was something that was a quick early lesson for me. I swore I would never correct someone in public. I would never, praise in public, punish in private. And I was a, young captain at shift change, and one of my older guys who he was challenging sometimes, but he ended up being like one of my, just favorite people to work with. But he kept saying something, and I kind of snapped, and I corrected him in front of everyone, and I instantly could see it on his face that I was out of line. And I was like, I swore I would never do that. And so I immediately, I let it settle for a second, and I was like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that happened. It will not happen again. And I swear it did not happen again after that. It was one of those things, like, it broke my heart that I had done that. And so I'm not glad that happened, but I'm kind of glad it happened, because it was, a smack in the face, like, so that was one. And I would say, I don't know that these are failures, but these are things I wish would have gone differently for me, but it's the way kind of life played out. I wish I could have been a company officer for longer. And I know I could have. Absolutely. That was my choice. But when the battalion chief process came open, when I got promoted, they were promoting like 4 battalion chiefs or 5 at one time. And it was one of those, like, it was such an opportunity that doesn't come around again like that. But I really wish I could have ridden that front seat of the fire truck longer and just had more experiences, because I just really loved that role. And I wish I could have done that longer. And I wish that I hadn't stayed as an administrative chief so long. I've been training chief and health safety chief back and forth a couple times. But for my family, that has been, for my family, I wouldn't change that, because it worked out in a time of my life where I really needed to be home with my son. And I really love operations, and I wish I could establish myself as a really good operations chief. And so I would like that opportunity sooner than later.
Yeah, I think for me now, it's kind of interesting talking about, the failures. And again, I think the goal is to share your failures so they're not made again, right? Yeah. That's how you're doing your job as an actual leader, right? You've made mistakes, and then you make sure the junior people don't make those same mistakes. Because if they are, then you're simply just not a leader. Then I wouldn't even know what you were, right? I mean, that's the reality. We cannot let these things continually happen, especially when you've made them, you've learned from them, and then we share what we learn. And that's what equates to progress.
All right, I got one last question that I think is, well, I have a lot more, but I think this would be a good one to wrap it up. If you were to be a fire chief, or you were to make fire chief, what would be the first thing you'd change that you believe would have the greatest impact on the department? Ooh, that's hard.
Yeah, I hate saying it, but it just comes back to what me and you talk about all the time. And I think it's, the people are the most valuable asset. And it is all about the people. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that say that, but words and actions are 2 different things. So it's like, how do you, as a fire chief, right? You have I mean, there's so many responsibilities, right? You have the administration of the village or the municipality or the district or whoever you serve, and you got to answer to them. And they have marching orders for you, and you have to do this. And okay, right? That's the administrative functions of the chief. But then as a leadership role, and in some organizations, like I understand, like the chief might not have any, sure, they might be the head of the department, but they have like zero responsibility to the people, right? They might have a deputy that is like really runs the day to day, while you're just the face and the politician for the organization, right? So I will just say the person that kind of runs the day to day and is in charge of the people. I think it's about the people, and it's like, how do you're shifting a culture, and nothing's going to happen overnight. But I think for me, it would just be a big focus on the people, and how do I show that I value them? What haven't they had over the course of X amount of years? What issues do they have, and how am I going to turn that around? Every organization has issues. And I think it's sometimes for me, like I cook, I like to bake bread. I think one of the first things I would want to do is sit down and bake some bread. Like I'll bring my bread in and we'll eat some bread, right? But I think you got to bake bread and cook for the crews. Show a general interest in your people. I think just gets so lost, and we have no idea what that means. But it's like, just talk about the family, talk about life, talk about anything other than the job, to get to know each other, because we have to know each other in this job. And have a meal, cook for them, buy them dinner one night, not just because it's Christmas. There's so many little things you can do that just builds value it shows that you value your people and make it more human-like. I think a lot of times we just get into this position where it's like we're machines. We have to do this and this way and that way. And if not, we're going to yell and we're going to be mad and blah. And, oh, it's Christmas or it's this holiday. I'm the chief, so I got to do something, right? No, it just comes off not genuine. So I think that, it's just take that authentic approach and just be real again. And it goes back to your values and what's important to you, and just bring those into the organization. And if you're authentic and you know who you are, bring that into that position and be that for everybody, and start changing a culture. But that's where it starts, I think. It's just learning to be a human being and being kind. Start there and work on that. And obviously all the administrative functions that go along with that. But as far as people and culture, it's like, just be a human being and be kind, because that alone is going to change a lot. But that alone is also a lot of work too.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. It's hard for me to answer that because, gosh, there's just so few. I know my guys probably maybe have a different opinion, but there's so few things I'd change where I am, and it's hard for me to answer that because there's so much I don't know about what the fire chief has to deal with, right? And has to, is up against. But I love all the things you're saying about just talking, like having conversations. And I always feel like if you were talking positive and you were always trying to find the best in whatever it is, there's a culture of positivity and a culture of success to me that comes from that. So that when you do have to talk about things that don't go well, it's not as bad. It's we're doing all this right all the time, and we're celebrating that. We're talking about that. We're not constantly finding the negative in everything, so that when something goes wrong, we can say, "Hey, usually you're doing the right thing, but I would prefer next time you lay into this. That's the first arriving engine. You need to be laying in more often." Or I didn't love how this call played out. Whatever. It's not as big a deal. It's course correction, but it's not a constant negativity. So I think, and we do a pretty good job of that, but I think that's something we could do better, is celebrating our successes and talking about them and sharing them, so that when we do share, and I also think we don't do a ton of after action reviews. And if we do, it's kind of at the shift level and we don't share it a ton. It's sharing that information that we're learning from stuff that, maybe didn't go so great for somebody, but we're not sharing it as you did this. It's hey, let's all learn from this, move on, and keep celebrating our success.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Is really just having regular conversations, talking about your successes, and then when things don't go well, that conversation is a lot easier, and people are more open to listen too, and want to change.
I'm going to save some of these because I got a bunch more that are super great talking points, and we can really use them to develop some more episodes. And some of these people that sent questions, I think we could grab for interviews for sure.
Yeah, I
love to get their perspectives.
Everybody wrote down all our answers, so now we're gonna get inundated the next week about, hey, I heard you said this, right?
Yeah, I know.
That's the
All right.
best part. So,
Well, it is like 78 degrees here today.
whoa,
So
no,
yeah, I'm going to go sit outside before the sun goes down and enjoy the day.
all
Rest
right.
of Until next time. And please like, share, follow, all those things, and send us feedback if you've got it.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
And Kerry
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.